This is Empire Sports Alliance, unfiltered. No fluff, no filters, just the real side of sports. We're talking athletes, coaches, agents, doctors, executives, the people behind the scenes who actually move the needle. From building careers to surviving the grind to winning off the field. This is where real conversations collide.
Welcome to our first edition of Empire Sports Alliance Unfiltered. I'm Ronnie, joined by my partner and co-host Eric. Eric is a sports chiropractor, working with the elite athletes and entertainers, and I cover wealth management of all things. Today's episode is about the road from college NIL to the NFL. We've got Cameron Nash joining us. Cameron is an NFL PA certified contract advisor and NIL client manager. That means he lives at the intersection of pro football contracts, college athlete opportunities, brand deals, and the business decisions that can literally change a family's future. This is the side of sports most people never see. It's the negotiations, the strategy, the mistakes athletes make, and the moves that separate short careers from actual long-term wealth. So, Cameron, welcome to Sports Alliance Unfiltered.
I appreciate you both for having me, and I'm really excited to dive into the conversation. Let's kick it off and let's take it off.
Excellent.
All right.
Yeah. Let's start here. So, people see draft day, they see NIL deals, big contracts, but they don't see the work behind the scenes. So, in your opinion, based on your experience, what's the biggest misconception athletes and families have about what a contract advisor or NIL manager actually does?
That it is our job to assure that the athlete makes the team. That's the biggest misconception.
Good start.
Yeah, you got to think the mindset of what the athlete and their family is that we are the catalyst that drives that connection between team and player, which is somewhat correct, but we have to have ultimately something to prepare and sell, right? So, the main thing when we're diving into this journey is that, hey, is our athlete of some value to said team and vice versa? Does this athlete fit? Because everyone thinks, obviously, they'll have opportunity to be within that top 100 pick, within that scale from a professional side. And on the NIL side, they think that their 4 or 5 star ranking will give them leverage to walk into the door and ask for whatever dollar amount they may have, right? Versus the standard that the university has already set. For example, client A has a 4 or 5 star ranking, plays a premier position, and wants to have a top 12 selection for Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Miami, Tennessee, Clemson, Syracuse, depending on the fit, University of Washington, and maybe like 4 other schools, right? And you approach each one saying, hey, per these valuation websites, this is what my market value is based on the position, what previous players are paid, and the situation that may be. Whereas their top 5 may be Ohio State, USC, Michigan, Alabama, and Miami. And you have to analyze, for one, what is the rev share and their typical, budget, because rev share is essentially what the equivalent is to what we may look at a salary cap is for a team on a pro side, right? And then you have that situation and you go to Alabama, which may have a certain amount of dollar values for a certain amount of position. And you say, hey, give me $2 million from my first year deal. And they look at you crazy like, hey, you're not even going to come here and start right away. Right? We hope.
Does that happen a lot? Is that something that you see a lot? And there's just like people that have unrealistic expectation? I mean, being not just the athlete itself, but also the parents and stuff.
Yeah, of course, you want to be an advocate for your client for sure, but you always want to give the most transparent, realistic outlook of what they are at right now, and then also give a goal of what you want to push for them to be. But it's you and your client, it's a partnership, not necessarily. Of course, you're servicing them and you're working for them, but it's a partnership. It's like, hey, my relationships and my expertise in the contract negotiation space will give us the dollar amount that we feel like is fair, and that will give you leverage once you go to school and perform, because that's the part that we as the agent don't control, is your effort as the athlete and what you put in to, in your off season and your performance on the field. We can't control that, right? And that's 85 to 90% of the deal. Were you going to say something, Eric?
Yeah, so I have a question. So when I had my practice, I would work with a lot of high school kids.
Yeah.
And I would always say to them, all right, what's your goal? And obviously they all say, oh, I want to be a pro athlete. Great. What makes you different? What are you doing differently? And why would let's say a college team take you to begin with? And they would always say, well, I love the sport. I'm like, great. So did the other couple thousand kids. So that doesn't count. What else? Oh, I'm a hard worker and I'm good. Okay, so are the other couple thousand. So what else? And I would try to get to the point where it's like, okay, are you doing the right nutrition? Are you doing the right prehab where you're taking care of your body more than the other, kid and taking initiative? So when you're trying to pitch your clients in a sense, like, what are you looking for and what are you promoting to make them sound different and stand out compared to everyone else trying to shoot for the same spot as them?
Specifically, I look for football players all around, not just a guy who specializes at a position, first off. Measurables, a lot of the guys that play on Sundays, they were blessed with the genetic makeup of certain guys who don't necessarily walk around, on the daily on average. You got to have the measurables. You got to have the consistent play. You got to have the capability and the open and mindfulness to be a football player, not just a wide receiver, not just a DB, defensive lineman, because you got to think. On the pro side, they're taking a roster of 90 guys and shrinking that down to 53, and 48 of that 53 plays on Sundays. That's what you have your active and inactive roster. So think about it. 40 players are cut now just around that time between the start of camp within 3 weeks to the kickoff of week 1, right? Take that mindset. But then prior to that, you go into a draft with only around 276 picks, right? 7 rounds. You consider that. And then prior to that, you got to think about the 103,000 college players that each of the 32 teams have to go through their scouting process for months. So think about it. It's really a 6-month job interview that you're going through. And your job is to make sure that you're in the best shape of your life to go perform at whether you get a combine invite, a pro day invite, multiple all-star games. And then you have to think like, hey, I'm going to be one of these 276 players out of this 103,000. So that's where my mindset is when it comes to college, from a guy going from college to the NFL. From high school to college, you look for those traits, but then you also look for a guy who has something that's undeniable, which is consistent play and their mindset towards the game. It's like, look, if I'm going to be spinning my wheels and outreaching to these guys, one, you got to consider the academic side, because no one's going to touch an ineligible player. It's going to be a waste of time. Right. Especially a guy who's on the fringe. At the pro level, you don't really necessarily have to worry about school. That's a given. 2, you got to consider, on top of the consistent play, the level of competition that they're playing against. And that's at both levels. It's like, hey, yeah, you may have gone 2-8, 3-7, 4-6 during your high school careers, but if I look at the catalog of the guys or the schedule of guys that you played against, for example, the Trinity League out here in California is the best league in the entire country, because you got the number 1 team in the country, the number 4 team in the country, the number 10 team in the country, and the number 12 team in the country playing in the same league, not the conference. They play each other every year. And then you have that other excerpt of pools of guys that are going to other high schools, and that's just California. So you consider each pool and the level of players that you have. That's what I use to consider. It's like the level of talent, the amount of competition that you play, the consistent play against the high level competition, and just how do you show up in the classroom. Because one of my first questions, even as an agent, what's your grades like? Because if I don't have a thinker, you can't play this game.
Something you see right off the bat in terms of like, does that translate onto the playing field in terms of like academics, right? In terms of like, if you see, hey, somebody puts in the time and have certain grades, et cetera, that kind of tells you something about the player as well then?
critical thinking in a crisis management situation.
Right.
Especially certain guys are blessed with like photographic memory. Like that's one of my questions. Do you have a photographic memory? Because I got to give you a playbook that looks like an encyclopedia, and you got to learn that in 3 months.
But what about the emotional, or not emotional, but maturity aspect? We know, all right, let's admit it, guys, boys really aren't mature until about 26. So dealing with a high school to a college, you're dealing with a lot of immature kids. And yeah, we all did stupid things, but at some point they got to transition from stupid to serious. This is the direction I want to go. How hard of a time do you have with some of these kids that are unrealistic and super immature and all that?
That's where the partnership comes in. You as, I don't want to call it an elder, but just, an older statesman in their life, you got to build that partnership with them because they got to trust you to listen to you before they go make those decisions or whatever the case may be, right? Everybody remembers what they were like when they were 14 years old. Everybody remembers what they were when they were 18, 21, 25, and those monumental ages, right? Like you said, it's a maturity process. So sometimes you got to give them grace to understand that. And if you approach them from, I like to call it nurturing, because you got to have that advisement, because you got to have that trust when things are going great, and you got to have that trust that they're going to tell you when, I'm not sure if we can curse on here, when the crap hits the fan.
You're allowed to.
We call it unfiltered for a reason. You go ahead.
Oh yeah, when the shit hits the fan, you got to be able to have that discretion with them and understand that you're not coming from a place of judgment. You're coming from a place of conflict resolution and mentorship in a way, and that's what a lot of agents may be missing, because they think that, okay, throughout this process, I'm selecting to represent him, because not just only from the business aspect, we got to ride with him because this is a decision that we're making. Because at the end of the day, we're in a relationship business. Because even though the business side may not necessarily work one day, they may re-sign with you when it's time for that second contract later on down the line. Right. Or circle back when it's time. It's like, hey, you pitched me when I was an NIL guy. Things may not have worked out with the other shop that I've gone to. I trust you because you've always been an asset and always been a value add to me, regardless if I did business with you or not. So things may happen. This industry is very small. So yeah, so that's how I approach it. It's more of like, hey, because I got into the business for a totally different reason than just to spend the dollars. I was in these kids' situation, and I love this game because it taught me a lot about life and how can I make an immediate impact on these young men. As well as, it's nice to, collect that 1.5%, 3%, every now, once those clients come in. But at the same time, too, it's like, how can I make immediate impact on these guys who make an impact on millions of people?
So are you looking at the game now? It's obviously totally different than when you were playing. Are you happy you played when you played? Or do you wish you had the same opportunity these kids have now? How would have that helped or hurt you?
I'm happy that I did play around my era because, the nature of the game was still at its core. We play football. It's a violent game, right? But also, too, it allowed me to build some real camaraderie with my guys. The thing that I do appreciate about now is that the fact that everything is a little bit more player focused when it comes to the business side. And players are understanding that the power that they have, because yes, those guys will go out and seek out replacements, but their bottom line will take a hit. We saw it back, prior to my time. I had an uncle who played for the Rams during that era, when the replacement era was, and the NFL took a major hit, right? Because the names that they wanted to see, they weren't there, right? And now, once you started to build up that sort of rapport with your fan base, that's what is expected, especially on the pro side. The college side is a little different because the team allegiance is around the same, but the fandom is for who are we seeing here over the next 4 years because the turnover is so short, right? But like during my time, camaraderie was a little bit more needed. Team chemistry was really, really reinforced during that time. Whereas the transfer portal, it's its own beast. I call it the black hole of sports. So it's
Is
like
it actually? Do you feel
not
like
in
it's a
a not
good
not,
thing?
not in a bad way. The reason why I call it a black hole, because if you don't understand the concept of black holes, you're in an alternate universe. You step in
Yeah.
as a USC Trojan, you step out on the other side of the universe as a Tennessee Volunteer. Right. So it's unique. So
Think it's out of control and it's going to be able to sustain, or is it okay, they got to go back to the drawing boards and figure some shit out because this is a little ridiculous?
that's already in the process now. There's an organization, athletes.org. They're already in the process of writing a CBA. I was actually on the call not too long ago, and they're going to present that to the NCAA as one of the first additions to that, because that's coming. A CBA is on its way. It's needed, given the fact that, one, making sure that the variables that what makes the Wild Wild West in the NIL space are regulated, which I agree with, because it protects the players. My main concern as an agent is, how do I protect my player? Whether it's, if I got to take a couple of dollars less on the commission, but see him thrive, that means I just have to adjust my game plan, either bring in more quality players or just readjust my roster to say, hey, based on what you're making and what we're bringing in and how I can leverage you to make sure that you're in the best position so you can have the best opportunity to play on Sundays, because that's our end goal. That's what I'm just going to have to do,
But I mean, that long-term type of view, kind of like, obviously with me on the financial side of things, it makes sense as well. It can make sense mostly for the player, right? Because
yeah.
the career could be, prolonged that way. And for you as an agent, obviously, that's beneficial as well. So everybody really wins having that long-term view in mind, right?
Exactly.
Is that what you see?
Exactly. And it creates, more of a continuity and opportunity to build the relationship with the said players, because like I've had a friend, for example, I use him on the pro side because he went through something similar on that side when it comes to agent relationships. He had 3 agents before he was drafted, and that was in a 6-month span. Just think about, like, certain folks change their agents like they change their socks. But certain folks have a relationship with the guys who, were present and giving them advising since high school, just as an advisor, not even in regards to anything business. And that's who did their second and third contracts and who they ended up finishing up with. So, yeah.
I mean, as a top player, right, this whole process really starts like high school level, right? You were talking about some markets like obviously California, Texas, et cetera. That process starts really early on, right? In terms of
now that NIL is a thing, is about to start trickling into the Pop Warner phase. In the state of California, high school, yeah.
Pop Warner, really?
Yeah, in the state of California, high school kids can receive NIL deals, but it's like NIL is a state law thing. That's why the NCAA is trying to figure out how regulation can happen. So, like, whereas in Bama, high school players can't receive it, but in Texas, certain things vary. It's a state law thing.
How early can an agent talk to a kid then?
Depending on the state. So, like, for example, in the state of California, we can recruit kids as early as their freshman and sophomore year of high school and sign them to our agency, depending on their following. And you got to think NIL and pro football access, like, depending on the level, it's totally different, because NIL is really based around marketing concepts and principles. Whereas, like, yes, we deliver a set amount to be paid out to you, but you have these marketing deliverables that have to be ran through the team based on the rev share that is brought in, because that's what they're essentially pulling from. And also you have the opportunity to have endorsements outside giving your presence. But a lot of people don't realize that only 25% of NCAA athletes have these deals, right? Notable ones at that. Like, you have your Arch Mannings, your Trinidad Chambliss, Trini Chambliss out of Ole Miss, Caleb Williams, with the Heisman House. Well, when he was in college at the moment, but those sort of players, right? And that's the difference now.
How do you determine as an agent? It really is a gamble for you, because how do you determine how much money you're going to put in towards each kid? Because high school kid, he could get injured in a game easily and not even go to college. And that goes for every level, obviously. But where do you say, all right, I'm going to invest X amount, and then if these kids want more and more, when do you say, yeah, that makes sense, or I'll do it, but I'll pull it from your money later on or whatever?
That depends on, like, because that stipulation, that's, in a sense, like, if you're pulling later on, that's just you try to not be predatory, with that. And ultimately, you want to move ethically with that. But that goes back to your transparency with the status of what your athlete is. You can be a 4 or 5 star, but if you don't have a strong social media presence, that's going to be tough to sell to specific brands unless they're one to step in and have their social aspect and just push the athlete because they really believe in said player. But which is tough, because if you don't have an immediate connection with the brand that wants to align with that said athlete, nobody's really going to throw money at them to have that, right? Because just because you're a 5-star, your teammate with 100,000 followers before he graduated high school is getting these deals. That doesn't mean, yes, you may have the same athletic prowess, but that doesn't mean your media presence is there. So you just have to gauge that and be transparent with the real status of your athlete. Once you get to college, you have 50,000 followers just based on your position, because you got to think offensive lineman who may be a first round pick, maybe within the top 5. The fact that he's an offensive lineman, not too many offensive linemen that I know have major followings unless you're Trent Williams or Caden Proctor or those type of players, right? That's all transparency. It's like, hey, and also you have to be very strategic in how you want to set up the marketing. We all know offensive linemen love to eat. Why not pair them with a food brand, right? We all know the receivers, they have their sprinters, DBs are sprinters. Why not align them with therapy? It's just, you have to be strategic in how you position that. And that's where you go to your fiduciary side and say, hey, this valuation based on what we're receiving from the relationships that we have from a high school kid is that the NFL side is cut and dry. Look, we have the relationships with the scouts. This is what they're saying that you're graded as. This is the dollar amount that we have for a player that's projected to go at this rank.
But you're saying more like sponsorship and stuff like that. I'm referring to more also like, say, an agent hiring someone like me to take care of an athlete, to get them ready. How much money do you invest in someone like me? Or if the kid says, I want to get a new car, or we want to buy a house, or, that kind of stuff.
I mean, that's just depending on what your budget is ultimately looking like. So, for example, on the pro side, it's very simple. You are a must. Recovery is a must for a pro athlete. Well, any athlete in general, but as you're going through your process, let's say, hey, per session, you charge $750 per session for realignments for every 2 weeks or so, right? That's an added cost. But if we gauge him from a college player leaving the pros and he has his top 5 selection when there's other places where he wants to go train, the budget may be $50,000, right? And that's just what we vary. And you also got to do your research as an agent, like, hey, what client or what trainer and what chiropractor and what rehab center delivers the best results for the minimal cost to get the maximum output, because we don't want to burn the money. But I'd say the average range that I've seen a preseason training or a pre-draft training, I say minimum as low as $5,000 to $6,000 just for training. So in collective, maybe $15,000, but I've seen as high as close to $75,000, depending on the location, because you have your cryo chambers, your chiropractors, everything in house. Like, for example, the Exos company, they'll have at minimum maybe like 20, like between a low 18 to like 26 to close about like $30,000. Whereas you got to other private facilities, they're asking for $30,000 to $50,000 because they have other attachments that allow the player to be housed, fed, everything is in-house. So that kind of varies. But typically, if you want those, you're more than likely are having a top 50 pick, and that's okay. Because that $50,000 is going to turn back around, and their signing bonus is maybe, if you have a first rounder, the signing bonus may be $18 million, 3% of $18 million. I'll be okay. Spending $50,000, right? I'll be okay. But if you have a guy who's maybe like a 5th or 7th rounder, you may want to invest into the training, but you want to minimize the cost. So 15 grand may not be bad if your commission is 30, so you double your money, and that's just general business. So depending on what the return is, and that's where the strong relationship with the scouts and the front office as an agent. This is advising from, and I'm still early in my career, like advising the scouts are the heartbeat and the front office are the heartbeat of what the player selections are on the NFL side. The better relationships you have with them, the more clear picture of who you would like to go after.
So on the backside then, Cameron, so basically in terms of what you do, right, but again, what the public doesn't see is like obviously you have the relationship with the parents, with the player, et cetera, but then on the other side is, again, where you put in the work is having that relationship, that network of scouts, GMs, assistant GMs that you're connected with on the different levels, right? I mean, I think that one is just as important as the other. Is that the case?
Yeah, and it's mandatory, because you got to think those are the folks that are on the other side of the table that you're negotiating with, the GMs specifically, GMs and the salary cap advisors. Having those relationships, they'll give you a clear picture of what is good and what is not. The scouts are like what the talent. What were you going to say?
How would you rank it? Excuse me. How would you rank it in terms of like the importance from their perspective, right? If it's a scout, if it's a GM, we say, hey, you got these players, and you brought it up earlier in terms of like being on time, class, grades, etc., work ethic. How do they rank it? Obviously, if you have a physical specimen, that's one thing. But let's just say, in between, what is really important to them? Because obviously, those players are going to, represent their college, their franchise, whatnot, right? How do they rank it? What do you see there? I guess this could be important, especially for like young players and people listening in general. So
consistent play, the level of competition versus the consistent play. Personality fit is huge. You want somebody in your building that's going to want to work with the guys that are on their team, the staff, everybody, right? That's another thing. Like the intangibles are the leadership qualities and just small things. It's like, hey, some of the small things that I've seen, like it's like, hey, do you push your chair up back to the table when you get up from this meeting? Right? Small things like that. It's just attention to detail, right? Do you throw your trash away when you walk out, right? How's your presence when you carry yourself throughout the locker room? Of course, you hear the traditional last person in, first one there in the morning. That's another thing. But how consistent are you as a culture standpoint, And obviously, just when in doubt, can you play? And how consistent are you playing at a high level and how efficient you are, That's where it's like being a football player. They rank, do you play special teams? I always sell, I don't care what player it is. I don't care if you're like the number one player in the country. If you have opportunity to play special teams, play that because they can place you anywhere. We have a guy like talking to the scouts. You'll have a true idea because most of them, like they're scouting school. They have to go through scouting school. And a lot of scouts have played the game before. They've played at that high level. Whereas on the college side, it's different. And that's why I always reiterate to guys that are going from high school to college, if they ask you to play special teams, stay on there. I don't give a damn if you're starting. Play special teams. Play. Yes.
Just because it gives you another opportunity to showcase in terms of what
that's more tape that they have. That's more tape that they have to reevaluate. Like, if I'm a punt returner, kick returner, I would like to stay on. Like, of course, be coachable. If your coaches need you to stay healthy, do that. But it's like, hey, coach, like, if you still need me to catch these kicks and these punts, I'm here for it. If you need me to block kicks, I'm here for it. That's what made I use Ed Reed as a perfect example. Even though I don't know why he slipped so late in the draft. The only reason, probably because of his measurables. A lot of people don't realize Ed Reed is only 6 feet tall. He's not a super tall safety, but one of the freakish athletes you probably ever see, put on a pair of helmet and shoulder pads because he blocked kicks, he returned kicks, he returned punts. He led his team in interceptions, the ACC Big East Player of the Year during the time he was playing. He did everything that he did during his time at Miami. It was the same reflection of what he did once he got to the Ravens, and that's what these scouts are looking for. It's just, do you check all of the boxes with your athletic prowess? That's where we have the combine. I always kind of have a joke. Combine is a place where a lot of players lose money at times, but if you show up and perform, some places you can skyrocket your your opportunity there.
Actually, let me follow up with a question on that end in terms of the combine. How important, obviously it's coming up here soon, but how important do you see the combine in terms of for players? It probably depends on the player, but in terms of like you see certain players not participating, right, where others can't, wait till they get there. It's just, what is your recommendation on that end?
If I'm a first round, if I have a top 10 grade, all I'm only running is at my pro day. Turn on the tape. That's all I would say.
Yeah.
Turn the tape on. You saw what I did.
So again, that's just the downside risk is just way higher than the upside potential of maybe getting a pick higher.
But that's if you're a top 10 pick, right? It's like what I would refrain from it versus if I'm maybe potentially a day 2 to day 3 guy and I know I can get out of the bed running a sub 4.3. Why would I not get out the bed and go run it once and be like, okay, I'm done? Like, for example, Xavier Worthy, the first combine that I went to, I saw his 4.21 live. He was projected just due to his lighter frame because he played, he had some returns, but there was concerns regarding his frame. But when he put his hand down and ran 4.21, here comes the Chiefs' first round draft pick for the 2024 draft, right? Because that's undeniable. And his tape was undeniable too. It's just, use him as like another pure example. Whereas you have somebody like an Ashton Genty from this past year's class, you turn on the tape, it's undeniable. You just have to be aware that due to your position, you're going to a franchise that is in a rebuilding stage. And, we saw due to a lot of the ups and downs during the Raiders, and, I grew up a Raiders fan, ups and downs during the time, his time during this rookie year, he still was able to produce a 1,000-yard season, right? As essentially the most contacted running back this past year. He led the league in backfield contact this past year, as a rookie. And that's tough. Yeah. That's tough, but that's.
It didn't seem he had a whole lot of an offensive line in front of him per se. Not, for himself, but it seemed to be a very tough assignment.
I tilt my hat to the guys because, they're out there trying, and it's just continuity and just certain things, I've used, look at the Patriots from this past year. They went, 3-13 last year? They played in the Super Bowl this past year. It just was all with a lot of certain niches that made that team what they were this past year. So that's it. Certain small, go ahead.
If you don't mind just sticking with the draft for a quick second, just because obviously that's coming up. Any predictions in terms of what you were just saying? It's like, hey, here's a couple of guys do not even show up at the combine. Here's a couple of guys that, hey, maybe you want to showcase what you can do, and your draft stock might raise. Anything for this upcoming?
I'm a huge fan, even though I think he's still going through his rehab. I was a huge fan of Chris Bell out of Louisville. If he can. Of course, guys like C.J. Donaldson out of Ohio State. I feel like I saw that he got an invite. I know he's going to put on a pretty good showing. And if he runs a 40 that is to the scouts' liking, he's going to raise his stock because he was, I think, out of all the active players in NCAA, he was second. And he's the second largest leader in touchdowns in the NCAA for active players, that is. So downhill back, runs really hard, and I feel like there's going to be a resurgence of running backs over the next few draft classes, actually, just due to what Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry has done. There's going to be a change in the guard regarding that. So, yeah. But those are the two guys that stand out to me that I feel like given Chris's, rehab process, if he has the opportunity to go run, I think he's going to shock a lot of people. He stands about 6'2.5", 6'3". He's built like a linebacker, but he plays wide receiver. So he has something similar. I wouldn't call him necessarily the DK Metcalf freak athlete, but his acceleration is out of this world. He catches the ball in traffic. I just think that he needs to show his athletic opportunity, whether it's at the combine or at pro day. But I think he has a legit shot to shock a lot of people.
Wow.
Yeah. Those are two guys specifically. I use them as examples on the offensive side. You have your Caleb Downs. I wouldn't even lace in my cleats until pro day if I was like Caleb Downs. He's bar none one of the best players in this draft class. So,
How high do you think he's going to be projected to go in the draft?
I like him as a top 5 pick,
Yep.
just based on all of the things that he can do as a player. Well, I use Ed Rees as an example. He's kind of like
Yeah.
a similar fit for that. Special teams, strong presence, can fly around, plays physical at that DC position, and now you have kind of like a Rover Jack, NASCAR type of player, whereas he can play down in the box and come up the field with a run. He can play over the top, and you won't necessarily have, if you have your best corner on the other side, you can just allow him to roam and play him like a Troy Polamalu, Ed Reed type of situation. And it's like, look, whatever you see, go read, we got to get to the ball. So yeah, he's special. He's special. Yeah. So those are guys that I feel like I probably wouldn't run my 40. It was like, no point. You see my tape. I've been doing this for the last 3 years, right? Let me just go enjoy, do my thing at Pro Day, get loose, and see you guys in April.
Last question on that end in terms of like quarterback. Mendoza, clear cut number one. The Raiders not doing it. They're just taking him. What are you thinking?
I feel that the Raiders would just need to do what's best for their organization. That's all I can leave it there. That's all I can say about this. And I grew up a Raiders fan. I remember the Rich Gannon days. I was in 6th grade watching that Super Bowl. And it's just I love his leadership qualities. Mendoza. And he comes from a well coached team, and I feel like he'll be a breath of sunshine coming into that locker room after a few years of just being in the downtrodden space. But I appreciate those qualities and having it'll be refreshing to have that Heisman Trophy quality coming into that locker room.
What happens after they're drafted? So let's just say you go into the first round, right? In terms of like, what would you say in terms of if you had a player going in the first round, what's the expectation? Hey, look, now you're going to go to camp, right? Is it the same thing like you were saying before, like basically, hey, try to get on special teams, ask for it, or what is it that, that really to make a difference, right?
If you have a first round pick, you want to first. My mindset, obviously, get the business taken care of. It's the main thing where I really focus on as an agent, especially with contracts that are being, for the most part, set. How can we really push to get the most value out of the signing bonus? To make sure the player is set up correctly so we can get that part out of the way. And then now it's just, let's get ready to start this first day, because if they're choosing you in the first round, they want you to come play right now. There we go. There's a call. Sorry about that. But in regards to the first round, the mindset is coming in to make an immediate impact right away.
What's your thought on, so obviously the NFL will take a kid out of college and have them go right into it. Baseball, you're in minor leagues potentially for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. Basketball, you're in the G League a little. Do you like the idea that they go straight to the NFL, or do you think they should have a little more practice and grooming?
Just due to the attrition of the sport. We play a gladiator sport. So going in right away will get you faster up to speed a little bit more, because you got to think, we practice the most and play the less. If you think about it, we only have 17 games in a season, whereas baseball is 150. Basketball, you play 82, right? And then not even counting if you play for the Dodgers, you're going to the playoffs every year. So that helps. You can tell I'm a Dodgers fan. So yeah. But ultimately, I feel like getting right away. I feel like depending on the position, like quarterbacks, I feel like that's a position that you need to develop, because you're taking this large amount of information and then you're diving and throwing it onto a guy. I'm saying that he did have the experience in college, but it's a different level of play, because if you look at the level of play between college and the pros, you have somewhat of the similar size depending on that level, especially if you play on the FBS level. It's just the efficiency is faster. Everything is faster, right? Things are more efficient. You're right. Your routes are more precise. There's not as many trick plays depending on who you play. Plus, the level of competition for the most part is at that specific bar, because majority of the guys are big, fast, and strong at this level, at that highest level. It's just how efficient and proficient can you be in your movement to get this play done now, Whereas in college, it's still a development size.
Yeah.
And, in college where you see more guys making the stronger efforts to make a play. We like to call them business decisions in the league, but each business decision is unique because you want to make sure that you're still on that roster. That's the biggest.
See, I like how I'm a Packers fan. So I like how they get the quarterbacks. Because we've only had 3 quarterbacks in the last how many years compared to everyone else? But you're able to groom them, and they're able to grow and take their time, and you're not just throwing them in. I mean, look at the Patriots. They had, May, who was young, and then they had 2 rookies on the O-line that, they weren't prepared for that.
But it happens, situation. And that's the benefit of being able to get to a Super Bowl and have that experience, right? So what I feel is that, I feel like the owners and not necessarily the GM, well, depending on the franchise, the owners are a little bit more impatient because they say, hey, if I invest this amount of money, I need to win now, right? Whereas some may have not played the game before or may be familiar with the game where it's like, no, the ultimate team sport is football, and the most continuity and the toughest side of the 3 aspects of football that takes the longest is the offensive side of the ball. Defense, you have more of a free form because you have a base assignment and it's read and react. Special teams, you have your assignment, make sure you do your job, and everything will be aligned, and just tackle well, catch the ball, and catch the punt, catch the kickoff. Right. Whereas the offensive side, everybody's assignment is aligned. You have to get the continuity with the spacing. You have to ensure that your offensive lineman is communicating the right protection calls, or it could be a very bad day. So, the offense always takes the longest to build the continuity, specifically at that quarterback position, especially depending on the offensive coordinator. You may go to the wall. Whereas in their play clock, they may have a quarterback coming out with 3 plays on every snap. That's a lot to ingest within a short amount of time. So that's why I feel that the patience for developing the quarterback position specifically is needed. And more patience is needed, right? You look at Sam Darnold, won the Super Bowl this year. He played for 5 teams over the last few years, right? If he had the right supporting cast around him during his time in New York, will we be talking about him in Seattle right now? Just really think about it. Like who was on the Jets team during his time that really, outside of that defense? Of course, they always had a stout defense, but let's take a.
Come on,
I feel like after being here, I'm a Jets fan. Okay, so good for Sam Darnold. Probably could have supported him a little bit more, but no, good for him. But,
and that's
we now have drafted 2 quarterbacks that won Super Bowl.
Hey.
So that's good.
The talent was there. Trust me. And I saw it. I personally saw it. Everyone saw the arm talent. It's just, if you can't protect your quarterback, what are we doing? And that's just general football at all levels. If you can't protect the guy who's dropping back to throwing those darts across the field, what are we doing?
Right. So from a business perspective, then, if you have a quarterback as your client, right, in terms of what do you do in a situation like that, right? If Geno Smith is your client again, let's just say, again, not pointing fingers, but let's just say he had a tougher time in terms of getting protection, right? Or even then as a next follow-up question, you see more out of Oregon, obviously, people were saying, hey, his agent basically, said, hey, don't go and, be eligible for the draft because you might get drafted by the Jets, right? Which even though we had, I think, a pretty solid offensive line this last season. But what's your take there from an agent perspective, from a business perspective, in terms of hey, if we do X, Y might happen. That might not be good. But
you got to forecast it and say, all right, on this side of the NFL, who, especially if you got a first round pick, who is butchering their season thus far, right? And it's okay, because a bad season, it happens, right? Right. Look at the Detroit Lions over the last 15 years from what they came from to where they are now. Right. And they had a quarterback. They had a receiver. They had a few notable running backs that held their own. It's just they played in a very, very, very competitive NFC North during the time where the quarterback play outside of the Bears was there. And the Bears I use as a perfect example. Caleb Williams' situation. He looked at that roster. That's all they were missing. And you got to look for a GM that you're dealing with that has the forward vision for that team to put those right pieces around him. And that's what the Bears did, right? DJ Moore's there. DeAndre Swift is there. They drafted Rome out of University of Washington. That defense is actually showed up this past year, right? It's like what does the roster look like coming in? And I use him and I use Bryce Young as the perfect example, right? The Carolina Panthers did a full 360 or a full 180, should I say, from where they originally started when they first drafted Bryce Young. They weren't protecting him. Every single time he dropped back on his 5 to 7 step drop, somebody was in his face. And I don't care if Tom Brady is there. If you hit Tom Brady, he will be frustrated. That's just any quarterback, right? So that's the difference. That position is like, look, and the longevity of your career. 1, do you feel this place is home to you? 2, the coaches that are here, are they buying in on top of your performance? Because you're going to see the flashes of the arm talent there, regardless if you have a guy or not. It's just a matter of having is the vision of the GM aligning with the longevity of your career and where you can take this thing. That's why you saw Matthew Stafford make that change. He's like, look, I broke damn near every record that I could here in this position and at this franchise. And both teams were like, look, the downslide, or you can only get worse from this situation. Because how old was when they made the trade? He was 34, 35 during that time when they traded Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford. And obviously both trades worked out for both teams. And that's the vision and the foresight that you got to have as an agent. It's like, look, based on the philosophy of the GMs and how these folks are aligning their franchises, what efforts are they making to put the supporting cast around my franchise quarterback because he has the talent? What are you doing to make that effort? And going to my client and saying, hey, you see the effort that they're putting in and the results are not showing, or they are showing. Do we stay? Do we go? And that's where the frustration happens. Like, hey, let's request a trade, or let's make this happen, or figure something else out. That's the big difference. Because quarterbacks, that's the money position. That's the most unique position. And then I'm really praying the quarterback falls in my lap one day. It'll be pretty sweet.
Doesn't it, even from your perspective, then also, I mean, offensive linemen, obviously, if you look at the draft and, recent history, been, drafted at a very high level. So what if because obviously, there's only so many quarterbacks, but what if you're basically become the specialist to provide offensive linemen to these teams?
That's always the dream, because there's more of their positions. There are more opportunities for guys to play multiple positions. If you guys are an athlete, they have opportunities to play special teams, kick blocks, field goal routes, just field goal team opportunities, blocking kick opportunities. And there's always a team. All teams always need linemen. And it's not this, what we like to call the sexy pick or the prima donna pick, right? But you get a generational left tackle, you have a pretty loyal client, probably for the majority of your career, and you have somebody that's going to be consistent in their play in and throughout. And their careers are typically longer than everyone else's, despite them having most of the contact. The older a lineman gets, the better he does. I call that position kind of like the fine wine sort of position, because the more experience that you have at that position, the better you typically get. Yeah. So.
Well, let me ask you this, kind of like, as we're getting to the end, Cameron. So from a business perspective, right? If you fast forward 10 years, what would you want your clients to say that you helped them, build beyond just football? And you mentioned it to begin with. Again, you obviously looking at, when you start working with a client, it's not just what's happening on the playing field, but what would you like their statement to be when it comes to that?
I built a legit relationship outside of business where it's like I could talk to him about anything. That's the biggest thing. I made an impact on life, not just made him a few $1 million and set me up. Of course, that's game changing when it comes to families, especially for where I came from. But the main thing is that he made an impact on life, and his transparency and authenticity helped me grow as a person.
I mean, I think that's extremely important, because if you see how young these folks are, when they retire,
2.7
what's the average
years.
career of a player?
So not even until you. So to give you some context, so you have these things called accrued seasons, and you have these things called credited seasons. And two types of credited seasons: credit seasons for salary purposes and credited seasons for benefit purposes. This is at the pro level. So your accrued seasons are the seasons that you play a certain amount of games for your contract or your free agency status. So basically, if a guy who was drafted in the first round plays only 6 games in 3 of his seasons, he's considered an exclusive rights player. So that means the team has the leverage because your performance based on your injury history or whatever the case may be, for you to play 6 games or more in only 3 of your seasons as a first round draft pick, and they elect to obviously pick up your 5th year option, you have to fulfill that and go through a specific process. Whereas the first, like you go to a team and you have 6 years not 6 years, but 6 games within 4 years, you're a restricted free agent. An unrestricted free agent is a guy who played 6 or more games within 4 to 5 years. So when you go to renegotiate your contract and a team, or if you go towards the end of your contract and you go to renegotiate, wherever the case may be, you have more of the leverage because your performance and how much of your performance you did for said team, right? And you go to the credited side, you have to play 3 games or more to receive your benefits. And for longevity, that could be your pension, that can be, your annuity. So essentially your retirement funding. You're only eligible for that if you play for 3 games or more within a certain season. So to think about this, majority of the guys who come into the league don't receive that retirement because they only play 2.78, ultimately 3 years, right? And within that certain amount of time, you have to have 3.5 to 4 years on your pension or your retirement benefits to receive that. So the goal is obviously just to play the length of your contract. And don't get me started if you're an undrafted free agent, because undrafted free agents are only offered 3 years on their first contract. Yeah, it gets deep. Wow. So the goal is to make sure, that's why everybody's saying drafted is cool, but can you make the team? And that's the best, because drafted is the cut too.
Right.
If you're not performing, you're not cutting the mustard, they will cut you. They will cut you. And that's the reality of being a pro athlete. Playing 6 years in the league with 6+ more games, then will get you your retirement. That's a good average that you will want to kind of pursue, especially if you're not like projected as a notable name, or if you're like a solid player that comes in with a lot of special team reps and some plays, and then you have the PPE escalators, and it's a lot of details that go into, the setting up a career for an NFL athlete. It's unique. It's unique. So that's the biggest thing. That's why I want to assure us that, like, look, how do we put you in the best position to assure that you have this longevity once you hang your cleats up? So you got to go out and perform, and I'm going to scratch and claw to make sure that we have all opportunities to get you to any other teams possible, given your scenario. So
no, that's excellent. No, we appreciate Kramer, and again, as you mentioned, it seems like the talent is what gets you noticed, but it's the strategy that kind of keeps you in the game. It be that on the financial side, work ethic, etc. So I would say for everyone listening, if you got value from this episode, share it with an athlete, a parent, a coach, somebody who needs to understand the business side of the sport as well, before it actually hits in real time.
Also, too, one note that I would like to add, folks on the NIL side, this is one thing that the NFL doesn't do that NIL athletes can, college athletes. Set your business entity up now to assure that you receive payments through that, to assure that you get all of the tax benefits from that, from whatever state laws that you may have, given where you play your game. So, like, especially for like guys who play in Texas, Florida, a lot of the states who don't have any state tax, you can receive those benefits, and you can receive your payments as a business expense or as a business inception. That's huge. That's huge. And having a small LLC, like the nonprofit side, that's touch and go. But I always suggest, like, hey, set up your own enterprise to assure that, hey, check goes to said university that's coming from said university or said brand deal, pay that into your entity, and then you have that there. And contact Ronnie if you guys need help setting that up, or myself as well.
No, Excellent. No, I appreciate it. Well, again, Cameron, appreciate your time. Again, I think it's been, very
Appreciate you.
insightful, and again, for the audience, we try to keep these conversations as real as possible, right? Again, the insight on film. So, appreciate the time, and again, we'll see you next time on Empire Sports Alliance.
Thank you.